Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Kushi Bot. I'm here on behalf of UNC Journey, and this workshop's premise is going to be scientific writing. Again, thank you guys so much for coming. If you have any questions during the duration of this webinar, just please feel free to drop them in the chat or hold them until the end, and we will get to them. So before we dive into content, I wanted to inform you all that UNC Journey is currently taking submissions. The deadline for our next publication is going to be January 20th at 11:59 p.m. So if you're a current undergraduate and you have any research papers or abstracts that is independent work overseen by a faculty mentor at UNC Chapel Hill, Journey accepts these research papers. It can be from any field of study. You can find more information about how to submit, where to submit, more information of the previous work we've taken on our website, and I'll put that in the chat at the end of this as well. But yeah, please submit. It's super fun, super awesome. Okay, so to begin, the point of this presentation is to kind of introduce you to what scientific writing is, how to do it, kind of what makes up a piece of scientific writing. So the definition of scientific writing is a precise, objective, and structured way of communicating your research findings. And the goal at the end of the day is to be able to convey complex information clearly and convincingly to your audience. So the whole point is you want to be able to bridge different gaps between discovery and dissemination, and you also want to be able to serve as a tool for advancing knowledge. You also want your work to be easily peer reviewed. You don't want it to be like too convoluted that if researchers do go over your experiment that they can't do it properly and that they can't get the same results if they do try it. And you want to be able to inspire further inquiry. After someone reads your piece, you want someone to be able to take away different experiments that they can conduct with that, and you want it to be given to them in a very clear way and something that a lot of different audiences can understand. So I kind of hinted on this earlier, but the purpose of scientific writing is to communicate research findings clearly, to be able to facilitate knowledge and share it in a way that it can be peer reviewed, and you want to also be able to establish credibility and impact. Some things to consider when you are kind of thinking about what type of audience your scientific writing will come across. Um, it will come across your scientific peers within the community. So you want to be able to use strong technical language and detail. It'll also come across by reviewers. If you're publishing to any sort of journal or anything like that, there are going to be people that are looking over the clarity of your work, the structure, and the novelty. And then also, you want to be able to cater to a broader audience because it's not just your scientific peers and reviewers reading your article, it's also the general public who will be looking at what you're saying. So you want to be able to simplify your jargon as much as you can while still, being able to be providing relevance. But you also don't want to use words that are super hard to read, super like their meaning is very different than what you're trying to say. You want to have the most concise thing presented, especially to a broader audience. So now we're going to be looking into the specific anatomy of a scientific paper and breaking that down. So the first thing that we have is your title. This is going to be basically what your piece is called and referred to as you present it or as you publish it. So the title needs to be concise, informative, and it needs to reflect the core of your research. You want to avoid really vague or overly broad titles because if you do that, then your piece can get lost amongst the sea of different scientific writing that's in that field, or people will just think that it's too simple and it doesn't actually provide any new discovery. A good example would be the effects of climate change on Arctic biodiversity. Even though it doesn't sound like super crazy or super far out there, it really is a very concise way to say what you're trying to say, and it really hits on the key points of what your research is going to be about, which is what your title should be. Moving on, I guess I personally would say the most important part of your research article is going to be your abstract. An abstract is basically a summary of kind of everything that your piece talks about in depth. It's a summary of your objectives, your methods, your results, and your conclusion. And the reason your abstract is really important is because it's really short, but it does pack a really big punch. It's going to be like the first thing that people read before they decide if they want to continue reading more about your research. So you want to keep it between 150 to 250 words. You don't want it to be too long. Otherwise people can lose interest or people will think that it's just a little bit too long. And it should also be engaging enough that it entices your reader to continue. Think of it kind of as like a hook that brings the readers in and reels them into what you're talking about and what your research is about. So again, you want to keep it interesting, but you also want to keep it brief and to the point. So the next thing we're going to be talking about are introductions and methods. So the introductions part of your paper provides the background and it kind of sets the context as to what you're going to be researching. It will start by defining the research question or the problem that you're going to be addressing throughout your work. And it usually ends, you usually want to end your introduction with a clear statement of objectives that you're going to be that you're going to be conducting throughout the experiment, or a hypothesis where you're saying if I do this and this, then this will change. You're also introducing your different variables here and kind of just providing the reader with a lot more context as to like what is going to be happening. Whereas when you move on to the methods section, that's where you're going to be getting into the nitty gritty about the details of your experimental design, the materials you used, and the procedures that you did. The main point of the methods section is that you want to provide enough information that if your article does get peer reviewed, or if people do build off of their research that your article is saying, that you provide enough information in your methods section that someone can go step by step and reproduce the exact experiment and get the same results according to what you did. So an example of this we'll use, you want to be able to describe your tools and your techniques, as well as the statistical methods you use, so people can reproduce the exact same results. Okay, next we're going to be talking about results and discussions. So the results section is pretty straightforward. It's basically just where you present what you found. Oh, sorry. It's basically where you present what you found without interpretation. You want to be able to use clear visuals like graphs, tables, or charts to make data a lot easier to understand for your audience. A good rule of thumb for this is that your results should speak for themselves. You shouldn't need like a long and wordy like explanation next to your results. It should be really clear to interpret what your results are saying without that. You can use like descriptive headings and stuff like that for clarity in the results section if you need it. But again, if your results don't speak for themselves, then you need to find a way to make it a little bit more clear for your audience. And then finally, the last part of this would be the discussion section. So the discussion section is essentially where you tie everything together throughout your paper. It's where you interpret the results that you attained in context to the research question from your introduction. And this is also where you can compare and contrast from existing studies that are already done in your field. And also this part is really important because it's where you can kind of discuss implications, limitations, and future directions for people. So just in case someone is reproducing your study, or if someone wants to build off of the research that you've done, this is a really good way to kind of convey the reliability of your findings as well. And it also allows you to conclude with further suggestions, kind of showing how your work fits into the bigger picture of pre-existing scientific work that's being done in your field. Okay, so the next part we're going to be talking about is how can you write for clarity and precision. So it's really important to consider the two different voices that you're using as you write. The first one is an active, or I think I'll start by explaining why clear and precise writing is important when it comes to scientific communication. So it ensures that your ideas are clearly understood to the general public without any ambiguity. Um, there's this is important because especially when people are, replicating your research or when people are looking into how to build off of your research, they want to ensure that what you're saying is easily understandable and it's something that they can, build off of. And you don't want to lose any of, obviously you put a lot of hard work into your research and you don't want to have any misconceptions happen just because of how you've worded your piece. So let's discuss three key techniques to achieve this. The first technique is going to be active versus passive voice. So active voice is usually preferred in scientific writing because it's more direct and engaging. For example, instead of saying the experiment was conducted to test X, we would say we conducted the experiment to test X. Hopefully you guys notice like the difference between how that sounds. The active voice keeps the subject and the researchers performing the action. However, when we use the passive voice, it can sometimes seem appropriate, especially when the focus should be on the action itself rather than the actor. So the passive voice is usually used more in the methods section, whereas the active voice is seen used in mostly like everything else. Just because it makes sense because of like what because in the methods section we're talking more about the action rather than the actor, whereas with the active voice, it's the other way around. Okay. So next we're going to talk about keeping things nice and concise. Wordy phrases, uh, like I know a lot of times in research we see people say things like, I think it's important to note that. Like that's something that's used a lot. Those things can really be simplified to just say something like the results show like or something like that. Just because it obviously uses a lot less words and it makes it a lot more like direct and it makes it sound like you because the first way if you're saying something like it's important to note that might sound a little bit ambiguous. It might sound a little bit like unprofessional, so we don't want to do that. Also, it's good to use like less words to say what you want to say because the key point that we're focusing on is delivering the message efficiently without losing detail. So I guess a good like thing to keep in the back of your head while you are writing these pieces is the goal at the end of the day is to make every single word count without sacrificing the necessary details in what you want to say. Also being concise is something that like we've been taught since we were very young, especially not just in scientific writing, but like in writing overall. Being wordy, some people might think that, the more you write, the better. But actually sometimes if you do end up writing more, you can actually sometimes even end up like repeating points or maybe even canceling out other points just because there's so much content and it can get kind of like jumbled up and hard to read through. Okay, the next tip is we want to use precise language. You want to avoid vague terms like some or a lot and replace them with exact figures or measurable data. For instance, instead of writing there was a significant variation, you should specify what you mean, such as there was a 35% variation. This is just because precision strengthens the credibility of your work. If you use a term like some or a lot, people aren't going to know like what that means because in context of different things, some can mean like nothing or it can mean like a lot. So like that it does just add a lot more ambiguity if you use words like that. Whereas you want to quantify things, you want to put a number behind them, just so it sounds and becomes a lot better because you're adding actual context. Just remember it's more it's to the more straightforward and the more precise you're writing, the easier it'll be for your readers to understand what you're saying and to like engage with your. Okay, now we're gonna talk about common pitfalls and how to avoid. So the first common pitfall is overly complex jargon. I feel like we've talked about this before, but overly complex language is one of the biggest barriers to clear communication. Scientists sometimes use jargon or overly complicated phrasing, which kind of alienates readers outside the field. For instance, instead of saying the metabolic pathways were characterized by an elaborate flux of enzymatic reactions yielding ATP as an end product, which sounds really, really, that's a lot of words. It was a mouthful to say. Instead of that, we can just say, we studied how enzymes produce energy, parentheses, ATP. So that's obviously sounds like a lot. It's a lot easier for someone to understand what that means. And even if I'm not like in the biology field, I can understand what that means. So again, always strive to make your work accessible while maintaining accuracy because if you do use like crazy elaborate words, then people who aren't in your field are going to be completely confused by what you're writing. And they'll be less inclined to really care about what you're saying. Okay, next up, redundancy and wordiness. So this happens when the same idea is repeated unnecessarily or extra words are added into your writing and they don't really. For example, we investigated, examined, and explored the impact of X. We could streamline that to we investigate we investigated the impact of X. We don't really need all of those different adjectives in there. Because remember, clarity is more important than sounding impressive. And if those words don't really add value, we don't really have space for them. We want to make sure that it's as straightforward as possible. I've been talking about ambiguity a lot, but this is a really major issue that we see in scientific writing. Statements like some participants showed improvement are really way too vague. You want to be specific and provide measurable data and really like measurable details as well. For example, you could write 20 out of 50 participants improved their scores by 15% on average. So this is clear and it's a lot of concrete details that help the reader trust and understand your findings. Okay, and then lastly, one of the biggest pitfalls is unstructured writing. Without a logical flow, even the best ideas can become confusing. So, to be able to fix this, you want to create an outline before you even begin writing scientifically. You want to establish topic sentences that can signal the purpose of each paragraph. And you can also use these topic sentences to connect ideas with transition pieces, like however or in addition to. But a clear structure really makes your paper like a million times easier to follow, and it ensures that your message is being efficiently conveyed to the public. Okay. I think that's really all we had. Hopefully you took something away from this presentation and you understood a little bit more about how to make your writing better, how to understand and correct the mistakes that you might already be making. But at this time, we'll take any like questions or comments you guys may have. I'll go ahead and check the chat. Okay. Okay. Also, since you have a little bit of extra time, I'll go ahead and show you guys how to navigate the submissions portal on the website. And then we'll come back to the questions. Let's see. Okay, so this is our website. I think Riley went ahead and put it in the chat. So Yes. Okay. And then if you guys are interested in submitting something, you go to submissions portal right here on top. And this is kind of our like whole spiel on what type of submissions we take. We have an eligibility section over here, submission guidelines. And then if you guys also need to look at like the submission and style guidelines, we have like a really detailed document over here. But yeah, you guys can look through all of this. This is our timeline. And then if you guys are ready to submit, this is our and then you can go ahead and scroll the form and upload your submission. But yeah, it's a super great way to get published. But yeah, I will also drop the form in the chat if you guys are interested. Okay, awesome. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, if you guys can go ahead and check out our website, which is already in the chat, and also go ahead and check out our Instagram where we drop weekly content about like everything research. We also have like a bunch of different like like deadlines posted on our Instagram as well, following the submissions as well as other stuff that we do with Journey. So if you guys want to look into that, that'd be awesome. And then this is going to be the CLE credit form. So if you guys want to go ahead and scan this QR code and get your CLE credit, that's awesome. If it doesn't work for some reason, like let me know in the chat or like unmute and let me know. But yeah.
All right, we'll keep the CLE QR code up for the next couple minutes. But Koshi, thank you so much for the presentation today. You did a great job. Thank you all for joining. And I just wanted to reiterate on Koshi's point. So we do have our submission deadline coming up in just over a month. And Journey is an amazing opportunity to get student research and student work published. Um, and I guess what I'd like to say is there's a misconception that the research getting published in Journey is only specific to like biology and chemistry and physics, but Journey accepts research, student-led research, faculty-mentored research, or course-related research um, specific to any discipline that includes like the humanities, global studies, economics, business. So please feel free if you guys have any questions regarding what may be acceptable for Journey, please feel free to email us. Riley and I are Journey's co-editors and chiefs. Feel free to reach out to us directly. We also have the uncjourney@gmail.com contact that is also accessible to you guys. But yes, that deadline's coming up, so please be on the lookout for that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. I hope you learned something, and we'll have more of these events coming up. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.